We've got the camera sales data from May the 1st to May the 15th, and we've got some really big surprises. Now, Sony absolutely dominates, and they truly dominate this. Wait till you see the numbers. Nikon does quite well, but Canon completely collapses, only occupying, well, a couple of spots right in the basement. But there's no Pentax, there's no Fuji, and there's no Panasonic. Stick around after this short break as we'll get to the details. But first, please do me a favor. Follow me on Twitter, but most importantly, please subscribe to this channel. It doesn't cost you anything and really does help this channel grow. And if you're already a subscriber, thanks so much for your support. It's time once again to take a look at Yodobashi's top 10 camera sales. Yodobashi Camera is the 4th largest Japanese retailer with 23 locations. And every 2 weeks, they release their camera sales data so we can see which camera's trending. Isn't it hard to believe that we're already halfway through 2023? That we're reporting on sales data from May the 1st through May the 15th? I know, time absolutely flies by. It won't be long before we'll be talking about Christmas and Black Friday sales, and maybe even some rather significant camera announcements for 2024. But let's pull things back a little bit. Let's talk about our first surprise for the first 2 weeks of May. The Japanese retailer Yodobashi says that the Nikon Z9 is in the #1 spot, and it's absolutely dominating, although in the coming weeks, I wouldn't be surprised to see that spot toppled with the Nikon Z8. All news is basically telling us that this thing is flying off the shelves, and I can see from my own pre-sales data, I've never seen any camera sell as much as the Nikon Z8 in such a short period of time. And then in 7th and 8th place, we have the Nikon ZFC and the Nikon Z50. Both of these cameras have APS-C sensors. So Nikon has 3 cameras in the top 10 with, well, all of them being a couple of years old. So let's take a look at Sony right now. So look at this gap between, right here, between 1st place and 7th place. It's all filled with Sony. So we have the Sony a7 IV in 2nd place, and then in 3rd place, we have the Sony a7 IV again. Now this is a different SKU, and that's how Yodobashi reports their cameras. They use different SKUs. So in 2nd place, we have the Sony a7 IV body alone, and in 3rd place, we have the Sony a7 IV kit. Okay, so 2nd and 3rd place, and of course, in 4th place, we have the Sony FX30, an APS-C version of the FX3, which is a video-centric version of the a7S III. And then, in 5th place, we have the most recent Sony camera in the top 10 here, and that's a Sony a7 R5. This is the first camera to have a dedicated AI chip. It can shoot 8K video, and it can shoot 11 frames per second at 61 megapixels. And in 6th place, we have the FX3, again, a video-centric version of the a7S III. Have you noticed how Sony seems to be taking the innards, the goodness of the a7S III and putting it in pretty well every camera since? Well, not every camera, but look, we've got the FX3, almost identical, but a slightly different form factor, more of a video-centric version of the video-centric version of the a7S III. Then we have the FX30 and the just recently announced vlogging camera, the ZV-E1, which is rather surprising. Only just a couple of weeks after announcing this camera, is completely fallen off the top 10. But Sony here is dominating. I mean, I've never seen, we have seen Canon and Sony dominate with as many as 5 or 6 cameras in the top 10, but while not having 1st place, to have 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th place, 6 cameras in the top 10. And have I left anything out here? No, yep, the a7 IV in 2 places, the FX30, the a7 R5, the FX3. Sony is just doing really, really well. Yeah, 5 cameras in the top 10. Apparently, I can't count. So 5 cameras in the top 10. Sony's doing really, really well. But Canon, now this is rather interesting. Now, Canon is, and keep in mind, this is the Japanese market. This is the 4th largest retailer, and we might see different numbers here in the United States, Canada, and Europe. And what we're seeing in North America right now are huge discounts on the Canon EOS R5. But the Canon EOS R5, the R3, and the recently announced and started shipping Canon EOS R6 Mark II, completely absent from this list. In fact, the R3 and the R5, which pretty well dominated the top 5 for, well, the first several years, just completely absent for the last couple of months. And I potentially think that all the rumors of the Canon EOS R5 Mark II, and of course the R1, has got a lot of people sort of holding back a little bit now. You know what, the R3 looks nice, but with the R1 less than a year away, let's hold off. And with the R5 Mark II also less than a year away, yeah, let's hold off. But still, Again, here in North America, in the United States, you can see the Canon EOS R5 currently on sale, $500 off at B&H, Adorama, and all the retailers. That's a huge discount. And if you don't care for a battery grip, they also sell it with a battery grip, which you can turn around and sell for $350. That's right, $33.99 with a battery grip that you can turn around and sell, dropping the price even lower, closer to $3,000. That's a pretty big deal. But what we do have of Canon in the top 10 is the recently announced R50. And then, of course, last year we got, right around this time, we got the Canon EOS R10. But notice how these are more affordable APS-C censored cameras. They're not the high-end cameras that we used to see dominating Yodobashi, the Canon EOS R3, the Canon EOS R5, the R6, the R6 Mark II. We're seeing the more affordable cameras. We're not even seeing the R7 here. We're seeing the R50 and the Canon EOS R10. I find this week's camera sales data, or the last 2 weeks, or the first 2 weeks of May, the camera sales data is just very, very interesting this time around. The last time we got camera sales data, we were also reporting on the Nikon Z8 that was dominating, and there weren't really any surprises, nothing really notable. No one was really dominating. There wasn't really anything exciting. But when I saw this late Sunday night, I thought, well, this is interesting. I'm gonna have to get up early to report on this. Sony dominating with 5 cameras, but usually what we see is when a company dominates, such as Canon or Sony, we usually see the cameras dispersed through the top 10. We usually don't see them dominating consecutively like Sony is here, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th place. And of course, Nikon doing well with 3 cameras. But again, another surprise that I noticed here, if you take a look at all these cameras, how many of them were announced this year? Very few. Most of these are older cameras, and we're seeing more APS-C censored cameras this time around. But the question I have for you is, what do you think of these numbers? And one thing I do want to caution you on here is Yodobashi's reporting their 2 weeks of sales data, and they do this consistently. And what that tends to breed is wild extremes from one week to another. But the really interesting thing now is, well, the supply chains are starting to get back to normal. It's mid-2023, and yes, we do have issues with inflation, but all that stuff that started in 2020 is kind of dissipating, and cameras are starting to flow again. I've heard from multiple sources telling me that the Nikon Z8, all the pre-sales that happened, well, basically everybody who pre-ordered that camera is going to be getting it within the first couple of weeks. They've got plenty of stock, and that's huge. This is the first time I've heard anything like that since we had a camera announcement beginning back in 2020. Yes, it is still early in the morning, and I'm having trouble tripping over my words, and it's even my day off. You see, I care so much about getting you guys the information that I get up early on my day off on a long weekend. Maybe I'll go for a bike ride. Okay, enough of my ramblings of what I've got planned for this weekend. This sales data is going to change from week to week, but again, we're seeing the supply chains return to normal. So if you don't see the R5, the R3, or the Sony Alpha 1 on this list, it's not because these companies can't get enough product shipped to the door. It's because, well, there's no demand for it. So no Sony Alpha 1, well, that camera's aging a little bit. No 1DX Mark III, again, very old camera, no surprises. But no R5, no R3. Again, the R5 is about 3 years old, and it is getting ready for a refresh, but we're seeing a lot of really big sales. So if we were able to get the sales data from B&H or Adorama, I'm sure we'd see a slightly different conversation here. And in Europe, there are some sales on the Canon EOS R5, but not in the UK. We're not seeing as much. We're not seeing the huge, deep sales like the United States. And I got to admit, I mean, this is pretty impressive. $500 off the camera, and you get a free battery grip. In Canada, I think we're getting about $200 to $300 off. But I think the main reason for this is the exchange rate. So the Canadian dollar's lost around 3% to the US dollar. But in Europe, I think the euro's lost something like 8%. And in the UK, you've lost about 9%. And this is going back to, when I'm talking about these percentages, I'm talking about going back to 2020. And that's why the R6 Mark II has the exact same price as the R6, which is 3 years apart. The US dollar's gained so well against the Japanese yen that Canon said, well, we don't have to raise the price, but for all those other jurisdictions, because their exchange rate hasn't done as well as the US dollar, well, you might get a discount or no discount at all, or even if your currencies perform that badly, you might have to pay even more. And that's why the R6 Mark II does cost more in Japan. The Canon EOS R50 costs more in Japan than it would elsewhere. So let me know what you think in the comment section down below. But that's it for today. I want to get out there. I want to go for a bike ride. It's sunny out there. It's beautiful. It's spring. You can hear the birds chirping. But if you want to stay up to date on all the latest camera news and rumors, then go ahead and subscribe. Just make sure you choose all notifications. And for all those minor news and rumors, all those news stories that aren't quite big enough to have their own separate video, or perhaps you like the sales data, so you want to know when the R5 goes on sale, whether it's in Canada, the United States, Europe, or Japan, Germany, well then go ahead and follow me on Twitter, because all those stories that aren't quite big enough to have their own separate video, I tweet out. That's it for now. Thank you so much for watching. It's going to be a really interesting week. We have two major announcements coming up on May the 23rd and May the 24th. An announcement by Fujifilm and an announcement by Sony. So stick around for those. I won't be doing a live stream. I don't have enough time to take the time off. And it's a short week. So whenever we have short weeks, usually that short week is very, very busy at my day job. So I can't afford to take the time off. And I really don't think these are going to be really, really attention-grabbing cameras. Now, the Fujifilm XS20, I do think it's going to do well. It's going to be priced at around $12.99. But the Sony camera, the successor to the Sony ZV-1, supposed to be priced around $999. I do think it's going to do well, but yeah, I apologize, no live streams. Now, my commitment to you is whenever we do have a major camera announcement, I am going to take the day off, and I am going to plan a live stream where we talk an hour before the live stream, we cover the announcement, and then we have guests with hands-on experience to talk about the camera. So all that coming up. I know we do have some big announcements planned for the fall. I'm really looking forward to those. The R5 Mark II. The R1, we might get a development announcement, but really both of those two cameras are expected to start shipping in early 2024. The R1 especially in time for the for the Paris 2024 Olympics. But that's it for now. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you again soon.